Can't tell me sing this song, doo-da, doo-da. Can't corruption all day long, oh, doo-da day.
That guy.
Just say it.
Do Mr. Kearney.
Just say it.
Aidan Kearney.
Just say it.
Is it Mr. Kearney?
Kids in your imagination. Just say it.
Turtleboy.
Yes, that's it.
Aidan Kearney.
No, you don't need the...
Turtleboy.
You said it twice. Just say it once more. Come on.
Aidan Kearney.
Just say it.
Aidan Kearney.
Just say it.
Turtleboy.
Ever heard of a journalist like covering a trial and then all of a sudden he becomes the subject of a trial himself?
Sounds wild.
Yeah, that's what happened to this journalist, Aidan Kearney.
Yeah.
He's based in Massachusetts, and you know that Turtleboy sports persona? That's him.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we got our hands on the court transcripts and a bunch of background info on this whole thing, and it's like seriously a wild ride.
So what makes this so interesting, at least for me, is, you got freedom of the press, right? But then you also have the right to a fair trial.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And this case really pushes on that tension. You know, it gets into some really complex legal areas.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to break it all down. So Kearney, he's not exactly a wallflower, right? I mean, the guy's won awards for his journalism, been nominated for some big ones too.
Impressive.
Yeah, he knows his stuff.
We got to figure out if this guy's reporting style went way too far.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Kearney's saying he's being targeted, that he's uncovering police corruption in this Karen Reed case, and they're trying to silence him.
Okay, so hold on, back up for a sec. For those of us who hasn't been glued to this story, what exactly is Kearney accused of doing?
So basically, he's accused of leading these online harassment campaigns against anyone who was a witness in the Karen Reed case. And the Karen Reed case, that's a whole other story. She's accused of killing her boyfriend, and he was a Boston police officer. The media's been all over it, even talk of a cover-up. And get this, the U.S. Attorney's Office is involved.
Wow, that's not every day for a state murder case.
Yes.
So this Kearney guy, he calls himself a journalist, an activist even. He says he's fighting for justice, been really vocal about the Reed case.
And Kearney's lawyer is saying, look, these charges are totally unprecedented. They're saying this is a journalist reporting on a case. Yeah, he's aggressive, but this is like First Amendment territory.
So Kearney's team is basically saying this isn't even about his reporting. It's about what he's reporting on. They're saying he's being targeted for what he's finding out about this Reed case.
Exactly. Kearney says he was the one who exposed the fact that there was a state trooper involved in the Reed case who was himself under investigation for misconduct.
Whoa, hold up. So this trooper was being investigated while working on the Reed case that Kearney was all over, and now Kearney's the one in trouble.
Yep, and they're saying that Kearney was the one intimidating people.
This is getting complicated.
It is. And, Kearney's lawyer saying, see, this just proves our point. They are more interested in, shutting people up than they are in actually dealing with any wrongdoing in their ranks.
I mean, the timing is definitely suspicious. It makes you wonder if this is happening in other cases, maybe left high-profile ones, where they're using similar tactics to silence journalists who are causing problems.
And that's the big fear, isn't it? If journalists start thinking they could be slapped with charges just for doing their job, for reporting on powerful institutions, who's going to hold those institutions accountable?
Wow. Okay, so we're seeing the bigger picture. So what happened?
So Kearney ends up getting arrested at a protest related to the Reed case. Later on, they slap him with these witness intimidation charges.
That's serious stuff.
Yeah, and it gets even crazier. The police take his phone, right, and it's like they're trying to link him to Reed somehow, even though there's, no direct evidence.
See, this is where it gets interesting, right? Because to grab someone's phone, that's not some everyday thing. It raises questions, about due process. Everyone's entitled to fair treatment under the law.
Exactly. It just feels like overreach.
It could be. It could be.
Yeah.
Did Kearney actually try to scare people into silence? Or was he just, maybe a little too passionate about free speech?
This is where the legal stuff gets really interesting. See, the First Amendment, it protects journalists. That includes bloggers like Kearney. It's about government censorship, or rather preventing it. It's called prior restraint. Basically, the government can't stop you from publishing something just because they don't like it. Imagine them censoring a newspaper before the article even gets printed. Almost always unconstitutional.
So how does that apply to Kearney? Because the prosecutors are saying he went beyond just reporting. They're saying he was doing illegal stuff, using his blog to harass witnesses, even trying to influence the Reed trial.
Witness intimidation. Yeah, that's nothing to take lightly. But there's a catch. They have to prove Kearney was trying to intimidate these people, not just that his words maybe scared them. That's the tricky part. Free speech versus breaking the law, it's a fine line, and it's up to the courts to decide if he crossed it.
And it gets even crazier. The prosecutors are saying Kearney organized something called a Rolling Road Rally. Basically, he rounded up his followers and took them to the homes of people involved in the Red case. Witnesses, investigators, you name it.
So we've got a journalist covering a huge case, gets arrested at a protest. What am I missing?
But we're just getting started. Things are about to get a whole lot more complicated. So as this whole thing plays out, right, you start to see more people connected to this Karen Read trial getting hit with similar charges. Witness intimidation over and over.
So it's not just Kearney. This is starting to feel a little, I don't know, orchestrated.
And here's where the prosecution, they get really creative. They start connecting the dots, right? Trying to link Kearney directly to Karen Read herself.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying they're trying to, paint him as part of some grand conspiracy to throw the trial?
Bingo. And remember, this is all happening before Kearney's even had his day in court.
That's insane. You're telling me they're dragging his name through the mud in the court of public opinion before he's even been formally charged.
Pretty much.
So they're basically prejudicing a jury against this guy before his own trial even starts. That's straight out of a movie, except this is real life. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of other journalists covering this case. They've got to be thinking twice about what they write down, right? Especially if it's anything critical of the DA or the police.
You're talking about the chilling effect, and it's a real concern. Imagine, right, you're at a party, someone tells a joke, bombs completely.
Yeah, crickets. Awkward silence.
Exactly. Now, nobody wants to tell a joke.
Parents, everyone's afraid to be the next one to bomb.
Same thing with journalists. See a colleague get slapped with a lawsuit, or in this case, maybe even trumped up charges for their reporting. Suddenly, everyone's a little less likely to rock the boat.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got this whole backdrop of potential overreach, and then boom, total courtroom drama. We got these transcripts, right? And reading through them, it's like some legal thriller, only it's real. So Kearney's lawyer, he's in court for a totally different case, and out of nowhere, the prosecution hits him with this motion.
What kind of motion?
So they're trying to ban Kearney from the courtroom.
Seriously?
Yeah, during certain testimonies in the Read case. Can you believe that?
They're trying to block a journalist from reporting on a public trial.
That's exactly what it sounds like. And the transcript, it's amazing. Kearney's lawyer, you can tell he was blindsided. He's like, hold on, there's some funny business going on here. You know, Kearney had been covering the case, no problem, and now suddenly this.
So what does a lawyer do?
He starts making these procedural arguments, and they're good. He's saying they didn't give him proper notice, like they were trying to slip one past him.
Bold move.
Right. And then he points out these previous rulings on similar stuff, even involving Kearney in this same case, where Kearney was allowed to be there.
So there's precedent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the lawyer's saying, look, this motion to ban him, it totally goes against how things are supposed to work.
So he's making a due process argument there, too.
Oh, absolutely. And then it gets even better. He goes on to say that barring a journalist from a courtroom, especially without a rock-solid reason, it could have a chilling effect, you know? Like, imagine what that means for investigative journalism if reporters can be kept out of courtrooms for simply doing their jobs.
It's a slippery slope for sure.
Right. It's like they're saying, don't you dare report on this because we don't like what you might dig up.
And that's where things get really concerning, right? Because now we're talking about a much bigger issue, this whole balance between ensuring a fair trial and the public's right to know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, you hit the nail on the head there. It's like, how do we make sure trials are fair while also making sure the public knows what's up? Smells like a deliberate attempt to sabotage Kearney's defense, if you ask me.
Okay, so we're talking about some potentially shady legal maneuvering here. What does Kearney's lawyer do with that?
Well, he basically says, hold my beer. He comes back swinging, and his argument hinges on one of the most fundamental principles of our legal system, due process.
Okay, for those of us who haven't gone to law school, break it down for me. What is due process, and why does it matter here?
Think of due process as the rules of the game, right? It means everyone gets a fair shot, a chance to defend themselves. Imagine being accused of something, anything, but you're not allowed to know what the accusation is, who's accusing you, or even given a chance to tell your side of the story. That's what we call a violation of due process.
So the DA might have accidentally handed Kearney's lawyer a winning argument. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. And the lawyer, he doesn't let them forget it. He goes all in on Kearney's First Amendment rights. Says, look, this is a journalist covering a public trial. He was already all over this case, no problem, until
he dared to criticize the people in charge. Is that even legal, to go after a journalist like that?
That's the big question, right? Kearney's lawyer certainly seems to think something's fishy, almost like the DA's office is trying to make an example out of him, send a message. You want to criticize us. We'll see about that.
Okay, yeah, now we're talking about potential abuse of power. What does that mean for the future of, actual journalism if authorities can just silence anyone they disagree with?
It's a slippery slope, no doubt. That chilling effect we talked about. It's not just some abstract idea. It has real-world consequences. Journalists, they're less likely to push the envelope, to hold powerful people accountable if they think they'll end up in court for it.
It's tough, right? Because you have this journalist, maybe he went a little too far, maybe he crossed a line. But then on the other side, you've got the possibility of the justice system, the people who are supposed to protect our rights, using their power to silence dissent.
And that's the heart of this whole thing, isn't it? Where do we draw the line? How do we balance the right to a fair trial, everyone getting a fair shake in court, with things like free speech, freedom of the press? These aren't easy questions, but they're questions we absolutely have to grapple with.
Kearney's lawyer, Timothy Bradl, he's fighting back, says the rally was totally legal.
Okay, but how is that legal?
Well, and he's also saying the prosecution is the one playing games here, that they're intentionally stalling the case.
Stalling how?
Using legal maneuvers, red tape, to tie Kearney up in court.
So it's a legal chess match.
You got it. And Bradl's not shy about it either. He's even quoted as saying, I think he, referring to the special prosecutor, Kenneth Mello, is hired to do this to delay, to stop Mr. Kearney from getting anywhere with this case, to keep him away from the Karen Reed case.
He's saying they're trying to silence Kearney.
Especially when it comes to the Karen Reed case. And this all circles back to a really important legal principle, the defense's right to see evidence that could help their case. It's called exculpatory evidence.
Exculpatory evidence, what's that?
So it all goes back to a landmark case, Brady v. Maryland. And basically, it means the prosecution can't withhold information that might cast doubt on their own case. It's like a poker game. Both sides have to show their cards, at least the important ones, for a fair trial.
Interesting analogy. So how does that play into the Kearney case?
Well, Kearney's lawyer is asking for a wider range of evidence, especially communications from the alleged victim in the witness intimidation case. They want to know if the prosecution is holding back anything. Phone records, messages, anything that could help Kearney. They're even questioning the credibility of some key witnesses.
So they're trying to punch holes in the prosecution's case.
Exactly. And to add another layer to all this, there are court transcripts showing Kearney's lawyer accusing the special prosecutor, Kenneth Mello, of being a witness himself in all of this.
Wait, the prosecutor is a witness? How is that even allowed? It's a huge conflict of interest.
It's definitely a great question and something Kearney's lawyer is focusing on. If it's true, it could really weaken the prosecution's case.
Okay, so we're seeing the bigger picture here, but to really understand this, we need to look at the evidence Kearney's lawyer's presenting. What are they using to back all this up?
So one of the biggest things they're pointing to is this whole issue with missing text messages.
Okay, yeah, the missing text. I saw that mentioned in the motion, but it seemed like a small detail.
Oh, it's not small at all. So get this, the prosecution handed over what they claimed was a complete record of text messages from this woman's phone, right?
Okay.
And this woman, she's somehow connected to the case, but more importantly, she's connected to the investigation into Kearney. They're saying she was harassed by his followers.
Right, so they're using her phone to prove that Kearney was behind it all.
Exactly. But here's the thing, Kearney's lawyer is saying, hold on a minute, these records are incomplete. Like, there are key messages missing. Messages between this woman and the lead investigator on Kearney's case, messages to other people Kearney says were involved in trying to silence him, gone.
Wait, are you saying the prosecution might be holding back evidence that could help Kearney?
That's what they're claiming. It's a big deal, potentially a Brady violation, which is like legal terms for really bad news for the prosecution.
Right, because it's not just random text. We're talking about messages that could show if there was any effort to set Kearney up.
Exactly. Oh, and it gets better. There's also this media file, completely MIA. Kearney's lawyer says this file could have even more evidence about how the prosecution's been operating.
This is like witness tampering thriller territory. But even with all this legal stuff, we still need to talk about the Karen Reed case itself. Right? Because that's at the heart of this whole thing.
You're right. You can't separate the two. The Reed case, it's like the whole stage for this drama.
And Kearney was reporting on this? Or?
Oh, he was all over it. But not just reporting, he was pushing the narrative that Reed was innocent, that she was being framed by, powerful people. He even started using this phrase, Canton cover-up, talking about the police department.
So he was like playing defense attorney in the court of public opinion.
Pretty much. And that's where it gets blurry, right? Journalism versus activism. Because
Yeah.
now the prosecution is saying, see, this is what we're talking about. He was trying to influence the jury pool, turn the public against us.
And that by doing that, he intimidated witnesses.
Exactly. They're saying people were scared to come forward because they didn't want to be attacked by Kearney's online followers.
So it's a he said, she said, but with way higher stakes.
Exactly. And to make their case, the prosecution is pointing to these text messages between Kearney and Karen Reed herself.
So they're texting each other. What do they say?
Yeah, well, we don't know the exact content yet. They're still under seal. But the prosecution is making it sound like it goes way beyond a journalist and a source. Like they're working together, trying to game the system, you know?
Instead of just reporting on the case, he was trying to help her win.
That's what they're trying to sell, yeah. They're saying these messages, plus everything he was putting out there online, it all adds up to witness intimidation.
But Kearney says he's the one being targeted, that this is all political because he was exposing the police.
Right, and that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? His lawyer is making a big deal about them bringing in a special prosecutor, which is pretty unusual. They're saying that's a sign that Kearney exposed something big, and now they're trying to shut him up.
So it could really go either way.
It could. I mean, we keep coming back to those missing messages in that file. If Kearney's telling the truth and they're hiding evidence, that throws everything into question, doesn't it?
It does. This whole thing is crazy. It's a tough one.
It really is. And this whole thing, it just highlights how important a free press is, especially when we're talking about local news. We're talking about journalists who are covering our communities, you know. They're the ones keeping an eye on things.
Right. And it's like if journalists are scared to cover certain cases or question people in power because they're worried about legal trouble, what does that do for investigative journalism? It's like, where does it end?
Yeah, like, don't you dare report on this. We don't want people to know.
Exactly. And that's a dangerous road to go down. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get it. There are real concerns about what happens before trial, you know, how publicity and all that can influence a jury. But banning a journalist, that should be a last resort. Only if there's a really, really good reason. And even then, you got to follow the rules.
Totally. Because if this becomes like a normal thing, who gets to decide what we know and what we don't? What happens to accountability then?
That's the heart of it, right? This case, it's bigger than just Aidan Kearney. It's about the bigger picture, what journalism is supposed to be in a free society. It makes you think.
It's like there's that saying, right? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. We need people like Kearney shining a light on what's happening, making sure those in charge are doing what they're supposed to do.
100%. A free press, a press that's independent, that's like a watchdog. They make sure things are transparent, and those in the justice system are held accountable.
Yeah.
And without that, I mean, who's going to keep things in check?
Okay, so we got this huge fight over press freedom, but then there's this other thing. They took his phone. The police took Kearney's phone. That's a pretty big deal, isn't it?
It's definitely not typical.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, how much power does the government have to take people's stuff, especially when it comes to journalists and who they talk to? Because think about it, a lot of journalism, it depends on keeping sources confidential, you know. What happens if journalists think their phones can be taken, their conversations looked at, all without a good reason? What does that do to their ability to report?
I know I'd be second-guessing everything I wrote if I thought my phone could be taken just like that. Feels like we're getting to some pretty deep legal water here.
No, you're right. Digital privacy, freedom of the press, all that, it's still a work in progress, figuring out the legal side of things. And this whole situation, it just goes to show how we need to be talking about this, figuring out where the lines are, so to speak. Protecting our legal system, yeah, but also protecting the press.
It's like you got to find that sweet spot.
Right.
Where you're protecting how the courts work, but also people got to know what's going on.
Yeah, and this whole thing, it's a good reminder that our rights, you know, our freedoms, they're not just a given. We got to keep an eye on them.
So what about Aidan Kearney? What's next for him?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? The case is still going. I mean, will they drop the charges?
Yeah. Will he be able to go back to reporting on it?
And even if they do, will there be strings attached? It's all up in the air.
It makes you wonder, like, what can journalists actually do when they get hit with stuff like this, going up against the whole legal system? It's got to be intimidating.
Yeah, you don't say.
So what does this mean for local news, especially now? I mean, people are already kind of iffy about the media.
It shows you how crucial local journalism is, especially in a democracy. These reporters, they're covering the stuff that hits close to home, you know. making sure that the people in charge in their own towns and cities are doing what they're supposed to.
They're like those watchdogs, right?
Exactly. And what happens when those watchdogs aren't barking anymore? Things get kind of shaky. That's when misinformation can take over, when people in power can do whatever they want.
So what can people listening do? What's the takeaway?
Stay informed. Don't be afraid to talk about this stuff. And support those local news outlets. Remember, a free press doesn't mean you agree with everything you read. It means making sure everyone gets to have their say.
It's like you said before, information is power. And if we want to keep our freedoms, we got to know what's going on, got to be involved. This whole thing with Aidan Kearney, it's not just about what's happening in court. It reminds us that a free press, that's a right, not a guarantee. And it's something we got to protect.
Cases like this one, they matter. Support organizations fighting for free speech, for a free press. Those organizations, they need our support, our voices.
It's easy to feel powerless, but we're not.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your own voice. Speak up when you see injustice. Write to your representatives, talk to your friends and family. Have those tough conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. A healthy democracy needs engaged citizens.
This deep dive into Aidan Kearney's story, it's been a wild ride. Free speech, fair trials, the balance of power, these are issues that affect all of us. So keep this case in mind, keep asking those tough questions, and never be afraid to use your own voice. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.